Should I look at doing this, or should I do this? Should I take this job or this job? Should I take this class or that class? I can't decide, and we fail to move forward or to follow through. Sometimes we fail to dare. Sometimes we fail to take a chance. But a lot of this comes from this fear of the unknown. And the younger we are, the more unknown there is. When I was 16 years old, I remember the first time I got my license, and within 3 months I wrecked a car. And I remember that as one of the most catastrophic, scariest moments in my life. And I thought it was a total, absolute failure. I thought I was done. I thought I'd never drive again. I thought my parents would never let me leave the house again. It was horrible. Anybody in here ever gotten in a car wreck before? Right? Oh, so it wasn't just me. I wasn't the only person in the world who ever got in a car wreck, who probably shouldn't have been like doing whatever I was doing, messing with the CD player or something. So, when you think about it, right, we can accept little failures in life. You ever make pancakes? The first pancake, right? What do we call it? It's the throwaway pancake. That pancake never works, right? You start scraping and you're like, all right, that's the one I'm eating while Julie comes in the kitchen and says, hey, are we making pancakes? I'm like, yep, now we are. That first one was a throwaway. I'm okay with that. The first time I learned to play guitar, my brother sat me down. He said, this is the guitar. Get ready to stink for the next 6 months. But after 6 months, it gets great. But don't expect to be good for the first 6 months. You're just gonna not. Your fingers will get calloused. You're gonna get frustrated. You'll only be able to play 3 chords, and you won't play them well. And anytime you play a song for somebody, they won't recognize what it is because it's not gonna be that good. First time I rode a bike, my dad stuck me at the top of the hill with no helmet, right, and just let me go. And it ended in me learning how to ride a bike, which overall was a favorable outcome. Did I fall and cry and scream at him and tell him I don't want to do it anymore? Yes, that also happened. It was not a very good experience. So there are 2 types of failure that I'd like to talk about. And they are that total, catastrophic, everything is over, the life as we know it has ended failure. And then there is what I call incremental failure. And they are based heavily on your perception. What this gentleman right here thinks is a total, absolute failure, you may look at and kind of go, yeah, no big deal. I mean, it happens to everybody, right? You can learn from this. Let's move on. So really, it comes down to perspective. Think about it. When I turned 16 and I wrecked that car and I thought my life was over, I thought that was a total failure. By the time I was 30 years old and had my 4th accident, because my wife likes to remind me I'm not a good driver, I had my 4th accident. What did I do? I called my insurance agent. I filed a claim. Went back to work. It's part of life. Let's get over it. Live and learn. And if you might be thinking about some of those mistakes or failures you've had in your life where you thought it was a total failure, and now, okay, yeah, I failed the first exam. Everybody fails the first exam. And when you do it, finally, it's scary. When I did it in Bio 301 here with 500 students, I failed my first exam. It was a catastrophic thing. 2 years ago, I started my master's from University of Arizona. I failed my first exam. 2 years ago, I was working here as a teacher. I took a class in database management, something I actually know about, something I actually teach about, and I failed my first exam. Walked in overly confident, failed the exam. Do y'all remember who was in the class that semester when I failed that exam? Some people actually remember this. I came in the next day, I said, guess what I got on my exam, guys? 14 out of 25. You do the math, but it's not above 70%. I failed. And I made an A in the class. So was I a failure? Overall, I succeeded. So what I'm realizing throughout my life is the more perspective I get, the more experience I get, majority of our failures are not total failures. They are mostly incremental failures. If I decide one day to get courageous and not wear a helmet on my bike, I decide, you know what, I'm going to commute on 35 today, and I'm going to drive down 35 on my bike, and I get hit by a car and I'm gone and dead, that probably is not an incremental failure, because I'm not going to be able to look back on that as a learning opportunity. There's no more opportunity to learn at that point. That's a total failure. I'll give you that. But let's say I'm driving down Airport, because one day I am in a hurry, and I did this. I drove down Airport Boulevard. I was doing probably 30 miles an hour, and I fell over off my bike and slid right up to a bus stop while someone's sitting there reading the paper and looked up and went, man. I don't take Airport Boulevard anymore. It was an incremental learning for me, or an incremental failure, however you look at it. So let me tell you a little bit about my personal experience. I went to McCombs, I graduated with an MIS degree, and I applied to work at a company called Accenture. and I am proud to say that I got turned down for the job. I didn't get the job. But turned out, last minute, I'm pumping gas on 30th and Guadalupe at the Chevron there, and I get a call from Accenture, and they said, hey, we have a spot available. We have a 5th spot available. So I was honorable mention to the honorable mention. And they said, we have a spot available. You were next on our list. Would you like to take the job? Starts in a week. You got to move to Dallas. And I went and did it kind of spur of the moment. I interned for them starting in 2002, and I decided to stay full-time with them. So when I started to work for Accenture, this is what I thought I would be. I thought I was going to put on a suit. I was going to suit up. I was going to get on a plane, and I was going to fly around, and I was going to solve the world's problems. And why? Because consultants are smart people. I later learned that that's not true. Consultants are not smart. In fact, you don't go into consulting because you're smart. I'll tell you what consultants are. Consultants are people who look at problems, and they ask a lot of questions, and they don't know the solution necessarily. You think that's what it is, but day one I showed up and I thought somebody's going to ask me a question and I'm going to be like, here's your answer. If it was that easy, why did they hire me to do it? What happens is that consultants aren't necessarily smart. What they're good at is asking questions and understanding problems. And the next thing they're good at is they're good at going on scavenger hunts. And what I mean by that is they're good at thinking about all the possible places they could find an answer. Whether that be Google or Stack Overflow or some article or some paper. They're good at knowing that that person might be helpful, but this person isn't. But they might be able to point me to a person who is. They're good at managing their time, and they're good at going on that scavenger hunt and learning, and at the end of the day, becoming an expert and being able to actually come up with a solution. And so I suit up. I actually got up 2 hours early. I got up at like 2:30 in the morning on Monday, September 2003. This was my first full-time, not an intern, but I got excited. I got to the airport probably 2 hours early. I got on the plane. I was so excited. My first client was going to be, I was going to fly for a year. They told me, guess what? You're assigned to Office Depot. Remember that company that's no longer around anymore? Or slowly going away? We were going to do a project, and they said, your project will last a year. So my first week on the job, they said, for a year, you're going to be traveling out to Boca Raton, Florida, which is 15 minutes north of Fort Lauderdale. We're going to put you up in a corporate apartment. When you get there, rent a car at Enterprise or Hertz and drive on up and get here and let's get started. I was on cloud 9. I was so excited. And I even got this little tip. I got to the airport and I said, hey, I work for Accenture and I'm going to be coming here every week for a year. Can y'all give me an upgrade? And they're like, sure. They threw me the keys to a brand new Mustang. I was in a convertible Mustang and I'm just driving down Highway 95 in a suit. So excited. I meet my team and they say, okay, your first job, not to get too detailed, they say your first job is to draft a design of how we're going to get the data out of this old COBOL mainframe system and we're going to put it in our new system that we're going to be building. So I'm going to be designing that process. And I was like, great. And honestly, at that time, I probably recognized about 10% of the words they said to me when they were explaining what I was going to do. I knew what a database was. I knew what process meant. And I knew what due on Friday meant. That's about it. So my boss said, what questions do you have for me? And I said, I'm pretty good. Yeah, I'm good. Good. Are you good? I'm good if you're good. All right, let's do this. And because I heard that little tip, fake it till you make it. And that's why I was faking it that day. And so my boss came by every day. You doing all right? I'm good. And I was stuck. There would be days where I'd just sit there and I'd start Googling, like, what does this term mean? And they gave me a template. She said, go talk to this person. I sent that person an email and they said, well, I can't meet with you until Thursday. And I was like, oh gosh, so what am I going to do till then? And I was lost, and I did get, I kind of worked my way through it. It started getting a little easier, and I was really proud of finally what I did. I burned the midnight oil. I stayed up late. I mean, I was there till, the dark every night, and Thursday, I'm catching my flight home, and I dropped that design on the desk of my boss, and I said, there you go. And she also said, you have about 40 hours of budget to do this. So I had burned about 38 hours by Thursday at 3 o'clock. I had already worked 38 hours that week. And I said, here you go. I'm about 38 hours in, so I'm probably going to put a half day in tomorrow. You can call me. I'll work from home, and I'm going to take the rest of the day off. And, rolled, right? And I got to my desk, I'm grabbing my laptop, and I'm about to go, and my boss came by, she goes, hey, real quick, this is serious, right? And I go, yes. And she goes, okay, first off, and she was very calm. I could see that she wanted to scream at me. She goes, all right, first off, everything here is wrong. You went the absolute wrong direction. I wish you had talked to me on Tuesday. I wish you had told me you had questions, because I get the sense that either you did have questions, you didn't ask me, or you just have no clue what you're doing. And she brought my ego down to just sub-zero level. And some people, when I tell this story, because it's one of my favorite stories about failure, because it has totally transformed the way I think about things. A lot of people think she was mean. I actually called her the other day and I said, hey, by the way, I'm giving a talk on failure, and I just want to thank you for what you did, because what she did is she kind of made me sweat a little bit. She said, all right, I want you to fly home, and I'm going to spend this weekend not hanging out with my wife, with my husband and my kids, and I'm gonna be working on this and fixing the problem that you've created, because this is due on Monday. We've got to get it done. And you and I then, once I get all this turned in and everything's good, you and I are going to have a chat on Monday about how you do work here. That was my first week on my job. I flew, and as an extrovert, I like to talk things out. I don't like to wait. I want to just, instead of thinking about what I want to do or thinking about how to, let's just start talking. And she goes, no. You need to catch your flight. Don't take the later flight. Go on home. You have a good weekend. She knew damn well I was not going to have a good weekend. I get back on Monday, convinced that I'm not going to have a job, convinced that I'm basically going to get demoted, convinced that everything is over. This is a total failure, total absolute failure. And I learned a few things from this talk that I had with my boss. My boss said, you know, first off, this idea of failure is not an option. Everybody heard that? Failure is not an option. I love it when people say that. Absolute malarkey. Failure is an option, but we don't like to think of it as an option. Now, and let me explain what I mean. It's okay if Coach Strong walks into the locker room at halftime and looks at these guys, instead of saying, hey guys, you're all failures and we're going to lose the game, I'm going home, right? That's not a pep talk. If you go in there and say, failure is not an option, we are going to keep working every inch and we're going to fight our way through this and we're going to do our best. Failure is not an option. If you say that to somebody and it gets them fired up, so be it. But any other point you say it, it's wrong, right? If a business says, you know, if a company out there that is dying on the vine says, you know, we're going to totally reinvent ourselves, and they say, well, how do you think this is going to work? Like, well, failure's not an option. I'm like, that's not a strategy. That's just that's a catchphrase. So what I learned from this is that my boss sat me down. She goes, look, you made a big mistake. All right, you didn't manage your time well. You didn't ask questions. You screwed up. Let me tell you something. We all do. I screwed up when I was starting out too. So don't think that this thing that you did makes you a failure. In fact, the only way you're going to fail from this moment is if you choose to freak out and drop everything and quit. But if you take the moment to look at what you did wrong and never make that same mistake again and move on, it will be a success. And she goes, here's the other thing. You're going to make more mistakes. My expectation is that you just don't make the same mistake you made this time. Because if you keep making the same mistake at some point, they're like, yeah, this isn't going to work. You got to go. But if you promise me you're not going to make the same mistakes and you're only going to make new mistakes, you are welcome to stay here all day long. Because that's how it works. So this was the best thing I ever heard someone say, was that failure refines us, it does not define us. I think that's like, just gives me chills when I hear it. Failure refines us, not defines us. Because when you make an F on a test, you are not a failure. When I get in a car wreck, I'm not a failure. Did I fail at some part of my life? Sure. But am I a failure in life? No. The next thing I learned was that fake it till you make it is wrong. Don't fake it. All right? Just admit it. Humility is probably the first step you should ever take towards wisdom. If somebody's ever sitting down with me and a student's talking to me and I feel like I need to be this authority and I should never ask them questions when they're like, yeah, I'm really interested in forensic sciences, I'm interested in doing, and I've got this case, Professor Tuttle, and I want to know if you can look over and give me some advice. And I'm like, first off, I have no idea what forensics is, so what does that mean, like when you say that? And they look at me like they're shocked. I'm like, I've never had any experience in this subject matter. Like, what does that mean? And they were expecting me to give answers, and I'm like, no, I have more questions than I have answers, I promise you. So this fake it till you make it thing is wrong. And my boss told me this other thing I'll never forget. She says, look, you don't have to know everything. Accenture didn't hire you because you know all the answers. If you knew all the answers, we wouldn't have brought 34 other people to this project to work on it. We would have just said, we're bringing Clint in, and he's going to do all of it. That doesn't exist. They brought in me, and they brought in 34 other people, and a bunch of other people who worked at Office Depot. It was like a team of 60 people. She said, you don't need to be able to know how to do, you don't need to know the answer to everything. You don't need to be able to know everything. That's not what we expect of you. In fact, right now, I don't expect much of anything of you except that you have an attention to detail, that you can be responsive to my feedback, and that you try hard. Like, I don't expect you to know what a batch window is and know how to performance tune a Pro C job. You probably don't understand what I just said. I'm like, absolutely. I don't understand what you just said. And she goes, that's fine. But you need to be able to figure out anything. And we do that through critical thinking. We do that through identify all the possible resources. Don't just come up with solutions. Do you ever feel like you're in class sometimes and a teacher asks you a question and you just guess and you're like, I don't know. Professor Tuttle, is it answer technology? No, it's not. No, okay. But do you ever just think, well, hold on, let me think of where I can find the answer, right? I tell all my students, they come to me and they say, I'm so glad you taught me Excel. But have I ever really spent time in class talking about how to do Excel? I never do. I just say, here's your assignment. And then they'll ask me questions, and they'll say, well, that's a good question. I'd Google that if I were you. And at the end of the class, people think that I've taught them Excel, and they realize, Clint didn't teach me anything. He just made me work and figure things out. And I said, you're welcome. I got paid to do it too. It was awesome. And you know what? You walk away stronger and smarter because of it. So what happened next after my big failure? Well, I actually ended up getting promoted in 2 years to the next level, which is on the fast track, and I was very proud of that. I got promoted to consultant level. The next promotion up is the manager level. I didn't get promoted on the fast track, which would have been 3 years. I wasn't ready. I started to recognize when I just wasn't ready, I needed to admit it. And I finally said to myself, you know what, I'm going to take another year, and I'm going to get promoted in 6 years, and I'll be happy with that. So I did get promoted to executive level. I was a manager when I left, and I actually was PMP certified. And I was good at my job. And was I the best? At that point, it doesn't matter, right? Because we're no longer being compared against freshmen. I'm being compared against people who have been doing this for 30 years. There's no way I'm going to compare to them. So it's not that competitive environment anymore. At this point, it was all about what I could provide in terms of value. And I did my job well. But I did it because I was willing to accept that I didn't know everything, but I could figure out anything. And so one of the best things I ever heard was that I had a chance to sit and talk to a CEO of our company. And it's a random story I can't tell right now, but I sent him an email and asked him if he'd like to chat and get coffee. And when you email the number one person out of a 300-person organization for coffee, you get a little scared about what might happen. But I did it, and I went and had coffee with him. And he said, what do you like about this job? And we had this great conversation. And for 30 minutes, I said, what do you like about this job? And he goes, I like this job because every day I come to work and I get the sweats. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, every day I come to work and I might be presented with 10 things that I need to solve or figure out, and I only know how to solve 8 of them. I don't know how to solve everything. And he said, here's a piece of advice, Clint. You may be thinking that after 2 years as a consultant, your job's just going to finally get easier, and by the time you're here for 5 years, that your job's going to be so easy. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Because as soon as we realize you're ready to perform at the next level, we're going to promote you and give you twice as much work. And your job's going to get hard again. And you will never, ever get to a point where you can come to work and waltz in and solve every problem and waltz out. Because if we're doing our job, we're promoting you and making it hard for you, and you're challenged every day, and you want to come to work and solve problems. And so that was another thing that I recognized, was that failure and mistakes continued to go with me. Not haunt me, but continued to help me learn throughout my career. So good judgment, I started to learn that I had as a project manager, as an executive. The good judgment I have came from that experience. And if you've ever heard this quote, experience comes from bad judgment. I start day 2 of my project management course with this on the board. And I stand there and tell every one of my students, by the way, everything I'm going to teach you in this course is probably based on a mistake that I made, not because I'm a know-it-all. And I say that just so that they don't think that I'm there to stand up in front of them as the authority and say, I know everything. I'm actually here to tell you that that's probably not the best approach, and here's why, because I've done it 3 times wrong that way, and you shouldn't do it that way. Let's go this way. And I think that's important that we know that good experience comes, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from that bad judgment. And